I forgot to invite you.
Indeed.
And I got to tell you, folks, a podcast interview goes a lot better when you invite the interviewee. Hello and welcome to episode 243 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. It's Saturday the 9th of November. Hope you've had a good week and you're well and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. I'm your host Ian Truscott. I'm not a rockstar, but I am a CMO, and on this podcast, with the help of my chums, we share the marketing street knowledge that will bring out the rockstar marketer in you. Come say hello. You can find us at rockstarcmo.com or Rockstar CMO on LinkedIn. We have a slightly shorter show this week as last-minute client commitment kept Robert out of the virtual bar yesterday, but I'm delighted that we have his colleague Cathy McKnight back on the show this week, sharing her experience of content marketing world. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back. My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure, I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Hennika Watkis-Porter hosts The Entrepreneurial You, empowering entrepreneurs with insights on leadership, business, and success. Hennika, tell listeners what to expect from your show.
So we provide innovative business strategies and practical solutions to common entrepreneurial challenges.
And where can people subscribe?
Find us at hennikawatkisporter.com, as well as the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net, or search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Right, let's get on with the show and join my chum, Cathy McKnight, the chief solver of problems at the Content Advisory. Welcome back, Cathy, to Rockstar CMO. How are you?
I'm well, Ian. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. I don't know why I said that quite precisely. How are you?
You're articulating very well today.
I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best to be very organised and very precise for you, Cathy, because you know what I'm like. And I also appreciate very much that we're going to talk about Content Marketing World today, which was a few weeks ago. And I apologise. We had a recording scheduled and then I had some issues in my family. I couldn't come. And then last week I booked our recording session. Let me confess to the listeners, I forgot to invite you.
Indeed.
And I got to tell you, folks, podcast interview goes a lot better when you invite the interviewee.
Marginally better depending on who the interviewee is, but yes.
Oh, you listened to this podcast before. So thanks very much for your flexibility, and delighted that we could get together today, Cathy. How is Toronto today?
It's a bit gloomy today, actually. The weather's getting colder, the leaves are falling, but that is okay because it's necessary evil for the snow to get here, which I always love. So,
you love the snow? Oh, splendid.
I do.
But the thing is, when the snow comes for you guys, you're like digging yourselves out of it, though, aren't you? I mean, it's not just
sometimes,
pretty
but that's okay.
Sprinkling of snow. You've got. Well, I think it's a good job you enjoy the snow because I think you get about 3 months of it, don't you?
Oh yeah, easily. We'll have our next snow we'll have our first snow probably within the next couple of weeks, and then our last snow. We've had snow on Mother's Day, which is in May. So you just never know.
Yeah. And the weird thing about Mother's Day is we have different Mother's Day because I think ours is in March.
We do.
Well, I should know.
Yes.
Yeah. Part of the great rich tapestry of our two cultures. But there you go. All right, let's get on to Content Marketing World. So you went to Content Marketing World, I think 2 weeks ago, and it was in San Diego. And I want to start with the social element of it because I was chatting to Dennis Shao the other day and he described it as like a family. In fact, he did it in his newsletter. And in our virtual bar, Robert Rose created a special cocktail for you called the Cathy. And I had to start with the Cathy. Did you have some Cathys? I'm assuming you had plenty of real bar time. How was it?
It is very social and it is just like family. It's one of my favorite conferences to go to because you don't walk down the hall, 20 feet without running into somebody that you know or have met. People are super keen to talk to each other. It's a really, really community-based event. So it was wonderful. We did not have a Cathy. That is not to say we didn't enjoy other beverages, but no, we did not have that on any of our menus.
Well, I think one of the things he described about the Cathy, it was classy. So I'm assuming you had different classy beverages.
We did.
All right. So that's, we might as well end now because that's all I need to know about the event. But
okay, great.
We better talk about some of the content. You had 3 sessions, which I'm going to ask you about those 3 sessions. And I watched vicariously from over the pond. But first, what was your overall impressions and what were the themes from this year?
So overall impression, it's like I said, it's one of my favorite conferences. Of course, that 2-letter acronym that everybody is talking about was discussed, that being AI. So let's not talk about that. Robert kicked us off, and I loved it. He was a bit provocative and, rather than, sunshine and happy places and rainbows and unicorns, he challenged people. So CMI puts out a research study every year. I think it is the biggest or most extensive, at least, content marketing centric research that is done annually. I can't even tell you how many years it's been done, well over 10. And Robert kicked us off with we have reached the era of meh. And he referenced Monty Python's, the Knights of Me, and he called us the Knights of Meh. And I can tell you, the demographic that was in the room are not big Monty Python fans because there was silence, and you could isolate the people of our generation because we all laughed, and everybody else looked at us like, "What are you talking about?" So, anyways, it was funny.
You should have brought on the coconut.
Yeah, exactly.
The clip clopping.
But he challenged those in the audience, which I thought was great, saying, like, listen, the results from the survey and the study are showing no big improvements for the last 3, 4, 5 years. We're all stuck, fixing and focused on the same problem. So what the hell is going on? Why aren't you fixing the problems? So I love that. I love the challenge. I love the, don't just whine about it. It's time to start doing something, whether it's actually implementing the technology properly and to its full extent, whether it's getting the data in order and actually leveraging it to drive decisions, doing some analytics, understanding that constant reorganization and auditing of things is not actually moving forward. You have to action on the information you find from those reorgs and the audit. So I love that he started us off in that way. We talked about, everybody's after personalization. You mentioned I had 3 sessions. I think I said in all of them, I asked everybody in each of the sessions, who here is talking about one-to-one personalization in their office, and whoever put up their hand, I'm like, okay, put your hand down and just stop. No more talking about one-to-one personalization because it's ridiculous. Like, unless you are Aston Martin and selling like the one car they have where, like, I think honestly you can customize right down to the screws. You don't need one-to-one. It's expensive. It's cumbersome. It's complicated. Just stop, right? So, we talked about data, being data-driven, right? So leaning into what the information is actually telling you about things. Love that we're still talking about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we're not nearly as far down that path as we think. But this year, before we get into my sessions, there were the keynotes this year. There were a few that were just wonderful. Shabnam Magharabi, and I will send you the link to her name and her site, talked about the power of joy and the making connections and what it means, how impactful it is to be in service of others and to connect with others and give them positivity. And yes, this is what she does. So is it content marketing or marketing specific? No, she did tie it into, being that way for your audiences and things like that. But it was just this positive psychology focus. And I'm not, I'm interested in that kind of thing, and who isn't? But man, I walked away from that one just total mind shift. So she was fantastic. And there was a couple of other ones that, again, talked about, audience centricity and whatnot. But overall, I think it was just a great, they had some really good speakers that spoke to, no matter who you are or what you did, as an individual in the audience, you could take something away. And that's not always the case with conferences, right? Sometimes there's like, okay, yeah, this is great. It's moot to me, but whatever. But I think most people could take away some nuggets from all of the keynotes. So I thought it was very well done.
Nice. Yeah. And also that whole business with, this is what I was wondering as well is, I mean, when Robert talks about that whole business of meh, right, he's done it on the show before. And it's not just pointing at content marketing, it's pointing at B2B in general, right? And do you think that's the direction that content marketing world's going in terms of its in terms of the agenda? Was it broadly B2B marketing, or was it still very pointed on content marketing?
I think it was, we're moving away from maybe not the focus of this conference, but in general, content marketing is kind of just expected now, right? Everybody's doing it, no matter how big or small your organization, whether you are a department of one or whether you are, one of 300 in a marketing department. Content marketing is just, it's what we do now. So we talk about it, Robert and I often talk about it as the marketing of content versus content marketing, which is because that's what we're trading on now, right? It's the experiences, and how do you deliver experiences? You've got to have the content. So how do you market the content you have or will generate in a best way forward to create those experiences?
Yeah, I mean, this could be a topic for a whole conversation between us, Cathy.
Absolutely.
A few years ago, when this whole content marketing thing was first starting, I was very enthusiastic about it. And as you know, I was like VP of content marketing at a company. And I think I worked with Robert on some of that stuff when his first book came out and stuff. And I went to this agency and I talked to them about content marketing. And I was also talking to their clients about content marketing. But inside the agency, it was just about creating videos. It wasn't, the marketing of content and all that good, all of the strategy and structure around it was just, crank the handle out, pop some content. It's like, yeah, but that's what you've always done. So this is, anyway, like I said, that's a rabbit hole to go down another day, I think. But so let's get back to Cathy, right? And you had 3 sessions. So let's start with the first one. You got an early slot on day 1, by the way, I noticed when I looked at the agenda. So how was it? How was that for you? Like just getting the whole thing going?
It was good. It's a busy conference. For Robert and I and so many other people. But yeah, and of course California across the way for me. So it's I get there Sunday, and then 3 sessions, which were great. And I had my session in the morning on Monday, and then we did the executive forum in the afternoon, and then I had 2 sessions on Tuesday. So it's busy time.
All right. So your first session was called "Using Your Technology is Great, but do you have the technology you need?" I love this topic, basically, and it's something we cover a lot on this podcast because I'm a marketing technologist, and so a lot of my guests, a lot of people from marketing operations background. So you're in you're in good company. Well, you're in some company. I don't know whether it's good, but you're in. And I'm also envious of the fact you had an hour and a half to explore this, and we don't. I mean, we're going to try and keep this conversation down to half an hour. I don't know whether we're going to manage it, but what were the key takeaways from your session?
Boiling that one down, it's about, stop adding things. Stop, like before you add the next latest, greatest thing, is get your hands around what you have, right? And we work with clients, hundreds of clients, and one of the things we often hear is, oh, we can't do that. Well, why can't we do that? Why can't you do that? Because we don't have the functionality in our tech stack. And then we say, well, don't you have insert the technology mentioned that they have? It's like, yeah, well, then you can do that. And there's this disconnect between what people have within their MarTech stack and what they're actually using. Very few technologies are implemented and rolled out and adopted to their full capability. If people are using 40 to 50% of their functionality, that is not an empirical study. That is just observational estimate on my part. Then they're probably on the higher end. And then you have the latest, greatest, or a CMO gets convinced that you need to do this, or you have somebody convincing that, you should be headless, or, it should be, whatever it's going on. And people don't stop to take stock in what they have. So it was really about understanding what they need. So talking to the stakeholders, and all of the stakeholders, not just the usual suspects, doing a Moscow analysis on it is, what's a must have, what's a good to have, and what's doesn't matter if we have, and prioritizing. And then, do an audit and get rid of some of the redundancies and streamline and find out what people are paying on their own credit card for the $30 a month, because it's just easier that way. Because if that's the tool people want to use, then use that tool. There hasn't been a client that we've worked with where they've done that, where they've actually done an analysis of their needs versus what they have, where they haven't been able to save money by getting rid of something, because there's so much redundancy, right? And that's not to say you only have, if you have 3 tools that do same things, you might still need all 3 tools, because they might be doing the same or similar things for different purposes, and it just makes sense to keep them. But know that rather than guess at that.
Yeah. I think that the hidden cost of these sort of $30 a month things is very hard for a marketing organization sometimes to total up, isn't it? Well, I've got to manage it in this way. This guy knows that thing, or this gal. We've got to pull the content out of that, or put the content into that. We've got to pull the data out of that, or put the data into it. And it's, it becomes a $500 a month solution or a $1,000 solution when you include all that stuff. So I think that, but also I really like the audit thing, because, and you've probably, I've seen lots of case studies around technology audits, and one of those is how much money you can save. And as a marketer these days, right, if you can get a bit more money that you can put into your front line, then it's going to improve the performance of your team so much within the business. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about there, where you can save that kind of budget?
Yeah. And again, often the people making the decisions on the technology being acquired and implemented are not the same people who are running the adoption or in charge of the adoption or users. And so adoption is the biggest failure point, I think, of any technology. Again, not empirical study, but based on what I've seen. And we've seen huge success is when there is somebody within the organization who is being measured on the successful adoption of a tool, where it is part of their job to make the most out of the technology investment by getting people to use it. So it behooves them to not only ensure that the technology is meeting the needs of the stakeholders and that the stakeholders are actually leveraging it, but translating those needs back to the people who are maintaining the technology. They become that connective tissue. And there's a lot of organizations that don't have that person. It's a toss it over the fence kind of situation still, which is amazing. That still happens. So, it just takes some time. And yes, it's time, and it's time nobody has, but it's worth the effort.
It's amazing how these things don't change, aren't they? It's like, it used to be described as dark IT, the IT systems that we had within marketing. But now I think there are dark systems that are those $30 a month things that are on people's credit cards. But also, I mean, 25 years ago when I was in pre-sales, I was selling a content management solution. We were talking to a big government agency, and they said their incumbent couldn't do X, Y, and Z. Now, you know, if they'd have been talking to an analyst, that person would have pointed them and pointed out the error of their ways, because I knew, even that they were a competitor, that they could do those things. But of course, we didn't point that out to them. We just pointed out how well we could do those things. Right. And it just hasn't changed. The relationship between vendor and customer in terms of staying up to date, staying current with what they can do seems to be unchanged.
No, and I've been advocating for, gosh, I don't know how long, 15 years probably, is to have someone on the business side. They don't have to know how to code the technology or maintain the technology, but they need to be interested enough in the technology to stay up to date with what's going on and what the roadmap looks like and how it could potentially work for the business side of the team, so that they can be the ones going to whomever is responsible for the implementation and the upgrading and the maintaining to say, hey, listen, this looks like could be really useful. You know, we want to implement this, and here's why. And being that go-between and making it, again, part of their responsibility, something they're measured on, to make sure that the technology is serving the business, but that it's not just like, hey, IT, do this, and not collaborating with them to find that balance. Because often it's an 80-20, right? They want to do 100% would cost them 200% of doing what 80% will give them, right? So it's finding that balance and being that, okay, you know what, we're willing to give that up, but we really need this. So setting the priorities and, again, the must-haves, the nice-to-haves, and that's fine, we don't need that.
I think that'd be a great topic to cover with you at some point, Cathy, is that how technical we think marketers should or need to be, and how that needs to be part of their enablement. Because I find that my technical background is probably one of the most useful quivers I have in my bow. No, that's not right, is it? But, you know, one of the, that I can add a lot of value because I understand how technology works. But it's a struggle for some people, you know. So all right. Talking of, we're going to talk about content for the whole thing, so that's not a great segue, but it's the best I can do. You were then on day 2, and again, another morning session from what I can see as well. And this time you were talking about the topic was Tame the Content Chaos, Mastering Content Orchestration. And I think you and I have talked about content orchestration before. And so I wanted to introduce what that topic was. And also you did a webinar with Leanne Cove or Cave earlier this year.
Liana Cave.
Liana, what did I say? Leanne. I got it all wrong, didn't I? And that was one of the simplest names. So from Hilton, didn't you? And I'll include a link to that in the show notes, because I think that's one that you actually do have that's a rerun on your website that I can share. How did that session go? And what do you mean by content orchestration when you talk about that?
So content orchestration is the fine tune. It's the coming to so starting off, back step, content ops. There are a lot of different content operations typically within an organization. So you could have multiple content operations within even a singular marketing department, because the email team is doing it one way, the events team is doing it another, campaign team is doing it another. And what content orchestration does is it elevates, it takes all of those operations and streamlines them in order to create efficiencies, effectiveness, and alignment. So where you have a central core set of personas against which all of the teams are basing it on, where you have a standard practice and flow for how content gets created, regardless of the content. So from ideation to archive, this is how it works. It's not going to work the exact same way with all the same players and take the same amount of time for each situation. But what it is going to do is follow all of the same steps. So you're looking to reduce friction, be able to set expectations, have a better understanding. And what that does is it elevates content from being, a cost center to really a strategic function of the business, because people start, one of the critical things is with content orchestration is every piece of content should be starting with the audience. So when you think about that intake form, whether it's a content brief or a request, whatever you call it, I love to advocate that it should be as simple as possible. Have who's the audience you're trying to reach? Why are you trying to reach them? And what's the measure of success? So nowhere on that form should it be, let's do a viral video or, I want to create a microsite. So it's got to start with the audience and the goals. And then you move into, okay, what's the best way of doing that? And until you start putting and having your teams within your org, everywhere across the org, start thinking about customer first, you won't reach them the way you need to. Because if you start with the asset, you're reverse engineering the process.
Aside from I think this happens in every single business, I have a sense that you hacked into the Slack channel between me and my client. But because, we've just had the conversation of, we need to do more webinars. Really?
Yeah.
What are we trying to achieve here, kids? Right. So, so that was your second session. I just realized the time. We've got to get cracking. What's the third session? And I don't know how you feel about the time. I don't know why I got fascinated by the timing of your sessions, because your second session was just after lunch on day 2. So not only did you have an early session on day 1, you also had the lunchtime, just post lunch day 2. Everybody's been out drinking the Cathy's the night before. They're feeling it a bit. So, and it's just after lunch. How was that?
So are we talking to session 2 or 3 now?
3. We moved on to 3. I shall introduce it
3.
properly in a moment. Sorry. Yes.
No, that's okay. So session 3 was, so early morning, Monday, early session or right after keynote on Tuesday morning, and then right after lunch. So yes, it was fantastic. Had you know what? I had great attendance for all of the sessions. Both the sessions on day 2 were standing room. So that was lovely to see. And the third session was really a case study of the second session. So really,
so they were
extension.
Connected.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
So I've done amazing. I've been just so fortunate to have such a long relationship and working journey with Hilton. So I've been working with them for about 8 years on their content journey. It started with a technology selection, and it is now morphed into where I've been working with them for pretty much 2 years straight now on rolling out a content orchestration practice. And it started with their former ops team, which is now a content orchestration. That's the team that Liana leads, that we did the webinar with, as well as it, quickly moved into the content marketing team, which is led by Shannon Doubleday, brilliant content marketer. And so she and I spoke about how that looks for a content marketing practice. What is content orchestration when you actually start applying it across the organization? Because again, it's not a rip off the Band-Aid. Everybody has to get on the bandwagon all at once. You can do it team by team, small bit by small bit, bringing them on to those standardized workflows and practices and governance models and ways of thinking. And it has helped her team immensely, because one thing about content teams at Hilton, as I'm sure it's at a lot of organizations, but they are GSDers. They get shit done. If you ask them to do something, it's almost like, can't let them down. I've got to get it done, even if it's not their mandate. So we had to get, we lovingly call Shannon, or I lovingly call Shannon, an ocean boiler, because she wanted to do it all. It's like, okay, how do we need to get her to step back from that? And by getting, it's the same process, content process, as we've applied with Liana's team, applying that now with the content marketing team, and really looking at where her team can have the most impact and play most strategically and focus on those areas. It's helped them immensely. And so we spent the session talking about, the rough patches that we hit, and it's still an ongoing thing, but how much it's helped and the differences that they're seeing.
I like that energy. I think that goes back to what you were saying about the keynote that Robert started with, that we're the Knights of Meh. Because when you meet somebody, as it sounds like the way you describe Shannon, as this ocean boiler who's trying to get everything done, that kind of makes a change these days, doesn't it? Because we as a marketing craft or profession seem to be getting more and more conservative in what we commit to and what we do. And and we're just going to follow the same rules. So it's nice to hear that, and I can imagine you being in the room as well. And it's like quite the disruption happening, I imagine.
Oh yeah, I'm calling her out on stuff. She gave me permission early on to call it as I see it. So if it's been good. There's it's sometimes they're difficult conversations because there's value in what they're doing, but it's not the right value or not the right value for that team. And the longer and the more you enable another team to offload their stuff onto you, if you're helping them and you're just bogging yourself down. So, her saying no to people it's a journey. She's still working on it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's always happens, doesn't it, with content teams? And I've been in that situation where I've managed that. It's so easy to fall into that. What's the expression? You're just taking tickets and providing what people ask for rather than sort of saying no, being a little bit more strategic, a bit more and then the thing will be better if you just take that time to do that, right? Short order cook is the word I'm searching for. You end up being a short order cook, Rob. That's fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Cathy. And I know that we covered about 3-4 hours of content there in about 25 minutes. So there's plenty there. And I notice you're making some notes here about what we're going to touch on next time. So that's fantastic as well. Rich vein of content here. So it's good. The only thing I would say, though, the images are coming from there. And you're in beautiful San Diego. And I did see some lovely sunsets on various people's feeds. But the grey, the rooms that you were in, I thought they didn't look reminiscent of San Diego. Maybe they just didn't show the windows in the
There was no windows. There were no windows. So so I was in the same room for my first and second session. So it's your typical, the windows are in the hallway and you walk into a dark room. Yeah. But the session that I did with Shannon actually was in a lovely atrium, but it was hot as hell. And the planes, because anybody who's been to San Diego knows that the San Diego Airport, International Airport, and Naval Base on either side of the city is very close proximity. So we had Air Force planes going overhead. So Shannon and I periodically had to just take a pause, wait for the plane to go over, and then proceed. So I'll try and find you. I'll see if anybody listening who actually went to our session and took photos of Shannon and my session. If you have a picture of that, please feel free to post and tag me and Ian. So because I haven't seen them, because it was lovely. It was bright and shiny and warm, but lovely.
Lovely. All right. So that sounds fantastic. And I think it's weird that I was asking you about things like what time of day it was and what the rooms were like. But there you go. There was a lot of good content there. So what's coming up for Cathy? I know you've got a webinar coming up, correct?
Yes. We have a personalization webinar coming up in a couple of weeks, Robert and I. And then I am at Optimizely Opticon in San Antonio, Texas, the week of the 18th. That wraps up my conference season for the fall. For 24, actually. That'll be it for me.
Nice.
The same old, the usual stuff. So
nice. All right, cool. Well, I'll include links to both of those in the show notes and to the 3 sessions that you had. And I think that you can actually register, can't you? It's a paid registration, but you can actually watch all the sessions on demand from Content Marketing World. And I think it sounds like a fantastic event. I will always watch vicariously, and I need to go one year, but that was
you'll have to come fantastic. Next year. It's in San Diego again, so
great! I can see the plane.
September next year, so make plans.
I love a plane. All right, well, I'll sooner than that, hopefully. So next month, I can see you're making some notes on what we're going to be talking about. So we'll dive into some of these other topics. So I'll speak to you again in next month's show. And so that's see you then.
Great.
Have a good one.
All right. Thanks, Ian.
Cathy.
Nice to see you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Cathy. Tricky to try and summarize 3 or 4 hours of content she presented at the event into 30 minutes. But if you're interested in more, specifically her experience working with Hilton, as we mentioned, there's a really good webinar that's available on their website, contentadvisory.net. Click on events, and it's called Controlling Content Chaos with Content Orchestration. So that's a wrap on episode 243 of the Rockstar CMO FA Marketing Podcast. Thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks to Cathy McKnight. And if you've missed your weekly dose of Robert Rose, there is something we haven't plugged on this show before, his YouTube channel with a lot of his good stuff on it. Just search Robert Rose. I'll include links to me, Cathy, and all the things we discussed in the show notes, along with our blog, newsletter, and all of our previous episodes on rockstarcmo.com. Next week, it's Jeff's turn in the studio, and we'll be discussing relevancy and privacy. And I believe Robert is again traveling next week, so I'll rustle up something for that slot. In the meantime, have a great week, and I hope you can join me next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.